my husband would get stuck on a word, right, in a sentence, and I would, and then I'm like, why are we arguing over the word versus the big picture concept that we're trying to do? So if we go back to healing the inner child, one of the things that I learned this weekend under Dr. John D. Martini, we talked about living by your highest values. But before you can get to living by your highest values, you have to know who it is in your life that you put on a pedestal, right? And then who in your life do you look down upon? So infatuation or judgment.
Mm-hmm.
And neither one he's saying is okay. Can't put people on a pedestal and you can't judge, just be.
That's the thing. How do you learn not to judge? Because and usually we learn to judge ourselves, even the harshest, especially if you grew up in a family where you were always being judged, if you were always being criticized, if things were never good enough, whatever fault you made, those were always highlighted. A lot of punishment based parenting. I think in those environments, it's very difficult to not be judgmental because you've learned to judge yourself harshly. And even if, because I know a lot of people who grew up in a family where the parenting style was to constantly criticize you with the thought that it was going to give you the motivation to work to overcome the criticism. So you become this super achiever, trying to minimize the attacks on your insufficiency. So I know some great achievers in life, but they're so messed up emotionally because that was their motivation. They were constantly, oh, you got 5 A's and 1 B. What's wrong with that class? We got the B in. You didn't get straight A's. What's the matter with you? That kind of parenting where the parents believed that being super critical was going to motivate the child to try harder, and it might have, but as a result, you got this problem. You never feel like you're good enough because that's how you were treated. Like no matter how excellent you did, it wasn't quite good enough to make you try harder. And I think people have a hard time in relationships that grew up that way.
Yeah, no, judgment's a big thing. I think it's about how you do it. I mean, I think it's always about balance. You do want to have structure. You do want to have things to shoot for and advocate for, but at the same time you have to reinforce, right? So I think you have to kind of mix in kind of nourishing support in with when you do quote unquote discipline and how you discipline. So I've always I'm a believer in attack the issue and not the person, and oftentimes we attack the person. Right. So address the issue, not the person, like in that they're deficient in doing something because of whatever. Address the behavior or the issue. If that, and so it's like an impersonal thing versus like, hey, I'm not good enough versus, hey, let's talk about this action versus what the hell's wrong with you. Right. It's a different style, but I think if we picked up those skills and used them as we dealt with people, I think would be more effective. And first of all, and overcoming some of those issues because we're not attacking the ego.
Yeah.
Right. And we want to give people space to be and to grow. And sometimes that's a hard thing to do. I have to change my mindset. Raj, what you don't know, I already have permission to speak freely from the peanut gallery. My husband would get stuck on a word, right, in a sentence, and I would, and then I'm like, why are we arguing over the word versus the big picture concept that we're trying to do? And then I was talking to Naima, and I said, Naima, I said, but I'm getting stuck on the fact that he's getting stuck.
It's like this never cycle, Yeah.
So like it's been a process of peeling that onion, like, and I don't want to swear on air, so I'll just use the acronym of WTF. Really, like I'm mad at him for getting stuck on a word, but then I get stuck on him getting stuck, and he's already past it. But I'm like, but you did it, and he's like, yeah, I did.
But that's what happens. That's what happens in marriages because that thing that didn't get fixed in childhood keeps recurring in the marriage. And so you got to figure out what is it, whether it's the need to control someone or the need to have someone agree with you or the need to have someone approve of you, whatever the thing is that got developed in your childhood, it keeps resurfacing in the marriage because that person that we chose is the one that is reflecting the thing in our childhood that's still unhealed.
And I was taught you had to win.
That's it. I was the same way.
It's not about winning. It's about finding collaboration, and it's not win or lose, and it's not right or wrong. It's
Right.
just the lesson. Like, what is it? What are we learning? What are we taking away from this? What can we do better? How can we support the other person in processing when that happens? What things do you want me to say to you to support you when we do that? Or what do you want me to say before we go into that type of conversation so you can be mentally prepared? Because mental preparedness is huge.
Right. I mean, and I'm the same way. I mean, I was married for 20 years before my husband transitioned. And it took me the first 10 years to get out of that mindset of I have to win. I was very
It's gonna take that long.
10 years. So because and I could look at all the things, you know, maybe being the youngest child in the family, always feeling like, you know, I had to overcome this domination of older sisters or feeling attacked, whatever those things were. And my husband, I mean, he was 20 years older than I was. So, you know, one of the things I felt like, well, if I marry somebody older, I'm not going to have this power struggle that I always was having with relationships with people that were my same age. It's always going to be like, who's going to dominate? So I figure, okay, well, he's older, he's more settled. He doesn't have this ego need to prove anything, but I still had the ego need. So I was still challenging all the time. And it took me the first 10 years to finally get it. It's not about winning.
So Naima, I have a question for you. So in that 20-year relationship, at that 10-year mark, what prompted that shift? Was it what kind of got you to pivot? Was it pain within your own life that got you to come to that realization, or was it something else?
I'm trying to think what happened at that time that gave me that aha moment. I can't remember if it was one thing or a series of things, because you know you can go through a period of spiritual growth where there's an internal realization that you're the one that is creating the disharmony.
Yep.
And it's not that the other person needs to change. You need to change your response. You need to change the idea that they should do what you think they should do. You need to accept them for who they are. And
you had the best analogy yesterday.
Yes. And that realization, in order for you to have harmony in your relationship, you have to reach that realization that it's not your job to change someone. They are perfect as they are because that's who they are.
Yeah.
So the idea that this person must be what I think they should be, that's an incorrect idea. And as long as we're holding that idea, we're going to be in conflict with that person because we're going to keep thinking we must change them.
Right.
You don't even realize the arrogance of that. Like, why do I think I need to define who you are? You are who you are. You have a right to define yourself.
Well, you can't do it anyways.
Right. You can't change anybody. You know.
So there's only one way. There's only one way to really influence positive change in a person, and that's by changing yourself. So they respond to you.
Yes.
And it may take some time, but it's that shift in the response that gets a shift in
them.
Right. But it has to come from within them. It might take some time for them to come to that realization that there's a shift, and then they just act accordingly.
Right.